All right. Well, I am always super antsy when I'm trying to wait for 5 minutes after the hour. I like to start on time. So I'm going to go ahead and get going, and people that join can pick up in the middle of it. So yeah, I already did a brief intro, but for those that joined since I did it, Josh Poduska. Hi, everybody. I'm the Chief Data Scientist with Domino Data Lab. We'll talk very briefly about what Domino is later, and Domino is also going to be hosting the training environment, so you'll get a little bit of feel for what Domino is in a second. But I have been in the analytics space for about 20 years. Have a degree in degrees in math and statistics, and I've spent the first part of my career as a senior statistician at Intel. So I did a lot of manufacturing work, a lot of old school stats with like process control and experimental design and manufacturing modeling. And then the second half of my career, basically, roughly, has been more focused on data science, working in public sector projects, a little bit of retail, and then also working for a couple of large analytical software companies. Well, I guess I shouldn't say large and small. Leading teams, working on strategic initiatives, and also implementing data science projects as well for customers. So that's my background. I have been interested in AutoML for a little while now, and I've studied it of late a little bit more intensely. And I found that there are a lot of really great open source packages out there for AutoML. And what I've got for you today is a workshop to walk you through those open source packages. We're going to deal with Python today only. There are other packages in R and such that are really good too, but we'll just talk about Python today. And hopefully by the end of this training, you can feel pretty comfortable using several of the popular open source AutoML packages on your own. And you can take the code that we're going to share with you today, and you can download it to your laptop and save it for reference and for use in your own projects. And if we have time during the workshop, we will also allow everyone a little bit of hands-on with a brand new data set. So we'll walk through how to do this with a particular data set. We'll talk about some principles around AutoML. We'll answer questions. And then if we have time at the end, we'll let you kind of turn you loose and let you try it on your own and see how good of a model, how accurate of a model you can get down at the end. So, okay, let's jump in. I'm just gonna keep it in this mode here. So I already talked a little bit about the objectives. Let's see if I missed anything. Oh, maybe the last bullet point there. If you are wondering about the different AutoML tools that are out there, and you are not sure which one to use, this will be another byproduct of this workshop. Is you will learn what goes into an AutoML tool, and then you can, by that, you can make a determination on your own as to what you're looking for your particular purposes. I do have a little bit of code hidden in my project. I'll show it to you. It's not kind of front and center, it's buried in a folder, to go over what Azure and Google are doing for AutoML. I haven't gotten around to writing some code for AWS Autopilot yet, but you can take a look at that too if you're interested in what the three major cloud providers are doing, because they all three seem to feel like AutoML is a good place for them to play. So they're all building solutions to that end. All right, so what is AutoML? Let's start with that. Let's start with just making sure everyone's on the same footing. And actually, at this point, this would be a good place for me to try my poll. All right, I've never tried this before, so bear with me. This is a Zoom poll. Let's see if I can figure this out without making myself look too stupid. All right, so here it comes. How familiar are you with the scikit-learn Python library 1 through 5? And how experienced are you with AutoML 1 through 5? Well, I can see all the answers coming through, so that's great. I'm assuming, since I'm sharing my, you probably can't see it yet. So maybe when I end the poll and then share it, you'll be able to see it. All right, we got over 80% of the people, everyone has responded. So I'll give it just a second and then we will close it out. All right, here we go. End poll coming. Oh, we got one expert in AutoML right before I ended it. All right. So end the poll and then let's share the results. All right, so I don't know what that looks like for you, but hopefully you can, I don't know if you're seeing what I'm seeing on my screen, but we've got a good blend of familiarity with the scikit-learn Python library, with most people having some experience with it, a few newbies, that's fine. And then AutoML, nothing really, only a few people, 3 people are 4 or 5. So that's actually perfect, just the right amount of expertise and in the right spot for this workshop. So great, and that worked. Hooray Zoom. All right. So what is AutoML? One thing, so here's the things that AutoML could do. Not every package is going to do all these things. So it can pre-process data, which can include cleaning data up a little bit. It can do like some encoding of data. For example, if you have missing values, there are different strategies for how to impute those missing values, and some AutoML packages will automatically impute based on certain strategies. It can also select appropriate features. Typically, this is very naive. It's if you've used a random forest variable importance plot before, it will do something like that, some way, or maybe an L1 score, if you're familiar with that. It will take some score, some metric, and it will rank all the columns, all the inputs, all the features of your data set and say, here's most important to least important, and then it'll just keep a certain percentage. So it's not, usually not super kind of automated intelligence. It's just brute force. Let's just keep some of the features. But also some of the packages will do things like a drift detection, which checks to see if the data, if patterns in the data change between your trained data set and your test data set. And if they do, it throws the data out. The third bullet point there is what a lot of us think of when we think of AutoML, and that's it's going to select an appropriate model family. So it's going to check lots of different algorithms and run them through iteratively, and then see which ones perform the best based on whatever metric you tell it to check out. The fourth bullet point is the other big thing we usually think of when we think of AutoML, and that's optimize the model hyperparameters. So with every one of those algorithms, or every one of those model families, there are typically a number of parameters, and we call them hyperparameters, that can be tuned or set, and to the value of which they are tuned or set will determine how the model predicts, and it'll predict differently for different sets of values. So one big part of AutoML is to search through that entire space of hyperparameters, either in some smart kind of automated fashion, or you can directly specify how it should search through the entire space of potential hyperparameters. And we'll see some of that in action and get hands-on with it. And then lastly, there can be some post-processing of machine learning models that can be in the form of converting everything that happened into code into one file so that you have this one pipeline file at the end. Or it could be as simple as just give me the accuracy. So the packages vary as to their sophistication with that. And then critically analyze the results, again, just getting accuracy. This link at the bottom, by the way, I'll share all these slides with you. You'll get them in very short time. I'll show you where they're at. And so you'll have that link at the bottom. Also, that link is somewhere else too, because it's a really great website. I don't know who Mark Lynn is, but he made a really great website, and this image is captured from his website too. So we'll jump to that in a minute. All right. There we go. What I just explained verbally is described pictorially here. You have your training data coming in to a configuration space. In that configuration space, we can do some feature selection, some feature modifications. Features mean the inputs to your model, or the columns, if you think of a row and column data set or spreadsheet. You do your hyperparameter search and your architecture search, meaning architecture meaning your models. And then there's an optimizer that goes back and forth through this and can iterate many times. And there are some subtleties with the different optimizers use, which I will go over, and which ones are more meant for production and which ones are more meant for just playing around. And then at the end, you have your test data, you feed it into the model that you produced. And by the way, it doesn't need to be one model. It often is an ensemble, which means a collection of different architectures and hyperparameter settings that you found along the way. And there are different flavors of how we build those ensembles, which we will show, and then you get your predictions at the end. This is just I'm not going to dive into this because it's small and there's a whole bunch here, but this shows you that the world of AutoML is very broad and very wide. We're going to be spending all of our time up here in this red area where we're doing hyperparameter optimization. There is a neural architecture search for neural nets, which have some nice features in it. I have an AutoKeras notebook in the directory of notebooks that you'll see today that you can download and play with on your own. I don't have any data loaded into our workshop today to deal with neural nets, also because they take a lot longer to train. So we're just going to deal with standard tabular data today. But we're going to look at things like Bayesian optimization. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about different flavors of that. Tree of Parson is one of them. We're also going to look at a genetic algorithm approach. So we'll go through a few things that you see up here. All right, this is a great AutoML meme. A friend of Domino, the company I work for, who's a pretty well-known data scientist, said the other day, and I thought it was a great quote. He said, AutoML makes good data scientists better and bad data scientists worse. So don't think that AutoML is an easy button to solve all your problems. You still need to understand the data science lifecycle. You still need to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish and know some of the background of your data. But it can be a really strong, I'll call it like a finger in the wind test to make sure you're pointed in the right direction. It can also be a great way to baseline accuracy and to get a feel for what type of architectures, what type of models work well on the data that you have. So just remember, it's not an easy button. It's not, you very rarely, if ever, do you run AutoML and put the results right into production. It just doesn't work that way. So what is Domino? We will get you into it here in a second because we're using it for our training environment, but it is a data science platform. It's you can think of it like a data science management platform. It serves you up with all of the open source tools that you know and love. Domino doesn't create any IDEs. It doesn't create a flavor of Jupyter or Jupyter Lab. It just takes things like RStudio, SAS, MATLAB, and VS Code and Jupyter and serves it up to you on Docker containers with pre-configured environments, and then does a whole lot of management behind the scenes, putting things into production, managing workloads, controlling costs, building reports, project stages, Jira integration. I'm not going to get into all of it because there's a whole bunch that it does, and we're not even going to touch everything in Domino. We're just going to focus on our little workshop for today, but we'll be using Domino as our instruction platform, which by the way, we stood up yesterday. So fingers crossed, hopefully we did it right, stood up well, and everything runs smoothly for us here today. All right, any questions? That's my intro. Any questions on AutoML? And let's check the chat here. What's the difference between AutoML and MetaML? Honestly, I've never heard of MetaML. I don't know what that is. So I have to Google that and see what MetaML is. Any other questions? Maybe I'll get to that one and answer that one here when I have a chance to Google it. They might be the same thing. I just haven't heard that term, MetaML. All right, I'm going to take this URL here and put it in the chat so you guys can just grab it. And so this is the first step I need you to do is to go to that URL and then log in to the workshop, to the compute environment for training today. So I will give everyone a chance to do that. And then as soon as someone gets in, if they could let me know, yeah, you need to sign up first. You pick your own username and you pick your own password. Let me know what projects you see when you get in. I'm guessing you're going to see an intro to ML project, which is for a workshop we're running about 3 hours from now. Yeah, cool. All right, so that's what you guys see. So you don't need to go into that workshop. That's not for us today. We're going to use a different one. So again, once you log in, you do not click into the intro to ML workshop. That's not the one we're using. I'll paste this URL. If you look back at the screen I'm sharing with the PowerPoint slide, we're going to use this AutoML workshop AutoML project, which is a project that I created for our workshop today. It's on the same deployment, but you can't see it yet. So you're going to need to go to it by clicking on the link that I'm going to paste. Pasted. So once you sign in, then you click on this link that I just pasted, and then you're going to copy that project and give it your own name. And the copy button is in the top right. So I will bring my Chrome browser over. And up in the top right, you'll see the copy button. It says copy this project if you hover over it. You pick your own username and password again when you're logging in. This environment will be up for today. We have another workshop that we're running starting in about 2.5 hours. Well, maybe, what is that when it's starting? Yeah, and we will be using the same environment for that workshop, which is an intro to ML workshop. So if you're interested, that's another one that's coming up at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And my colleague Josh Mineroff will be running that one. But anyway, my point in saying that is this training environment will be up for a while today because we're running a second workshop. Was anyone able to successfully copy the project and make it their own? All right, yay. So now, obviously, if anyone's having trouble, please holler in the chat and we can help you out. All right, so one more time there, I'll paste them again. Actually, I'll just paste this whole thing. I'll paste that just for people who are coming in. Yeah, so first log in, then go to, and then you copy it. So put those back in front of all the yeses. All right, fantastic. So I am going to plow ahead. If you have some trouble, please put it in the chat, and some of my Domino colleagues can help you on the side. All right, so if you could, if you've navigated away from the overview of this project, go back to that overview. There are a few things I want to point out on the overview of your AutoML project, not mine. So you're gonna need to be in your own. If you're in my project, you're not going to be able to spin up Docker containers. But if you're in your own project, then you'll be able to. So that's why you copy it. So Domino is a great way to collaborate on projects like this, to share code, share models, and such. So what you just did by copying a project, you could have also forked it. There's a fork button. But when you copy the project, now it's your own, and all these things are your own. You're going to have the same, you'll have all the notebooks that I created, all the data that I created, and you'll have this README, this overview. So I've got a link to Mark Lynn's website. I'm not going to, there's no need to click it now. I took the parts that I wanted to discuss and put them inside of the PowerPoint. So we already looked at that. You're also going to see here a summary that I put together so we can remember when we are done with this workshop, we can remember some of the key takeaways. So we're going to go over Teapot, which is an open source Python-based AutoML package. We're going to go over AutoSKlearn and MLBox. Those are the three that we're going to focus on in our workshop today. As I mentioned, there's also some code for AutoKeras. I have some code for Google AutoML, for Azure Automated ML, and I don't have code yet for SageMaker Autopilot. Also, Domino works with H2O, driverless AI, but it's not in this workshop. And there's also a project out of Uber called Ludwig, which is for deep neural nets, which you could argue that it's not really AutoML, but it has some AutoML-ish features to it. So I included it here under bonus material. And then lastly, there's a spreadsheet from friend of Domino and well-known data scientist Paco Nathan. And he has a nice spreadsheet that he keeps track of kind of everything AutoML under that spreadsheet. So that's an overview of the README. And I'm not going to take time right now to read through all the bullet points of these summaries. We will go through that step by step as we start up our projects. All right, let's go ahead and start up our first Docker container. And by the way, you're limited to 2 of these at a time right now because we wanted to kind of put a cap on it for the workshop. You should only need really 1 at a time. So please click on Workspaces on the left nav. And you're going to see I spun up 2 workspaces about 30 minutes ago. I named one of them MLB for MLBox, and I named the other one Scikit for the other 2, which is Teapot and AutoSKlearn. So what I want you to do is let's spin up just one of them for now. And actually, I need to kill one of these because I'm going to need to spin up. I'm going to kill my MLBox one. So let's go stop. And I don't remember if I made any changes, so I'm just going to say commit results. All right, so go ahead and click on a new workspace. And when this dialog comes up, I need to give you a few instructions on this. You're going to have an option to look at a small 1-core compute setup, a tier, or the default is just 2 cores. So you can probably just keep the default. And then, hold on, there's something, workspace is empty. Yep, that's fine. You haven't spun up any workspaces. It should be empty. I've been playing with mine, over the last couple of days, so I have a lot there. Under workspace environment, we have 3 pre-configured Docker images available to you. So I'm going to need to give you instructions on which one to use at every step of our workshop today. The first one I want you to use is the Domino Analytics Distribution Pi36 R36. So we're going to start with that one. And for everything we do today, I would encourage you to use Jupyter Lab. So every time you start up one of these workspaces, let's use Jupyter Lab. And this first one, you can give it a name. You can call it whatever you want, and you don't even have to name it. What I'm going to walk you through now is some baseline accuracy tests on, excuse me, on the data that we're going to look at today. So I'll leave this up, and after you got that set up, you click launch. So we're going to have, you give it a name. Oh, there's no sound. Can anyone else hear me? Yeah, cool. All right. If you can't get the sound, maybe try logging out and logging back in, or making sure your computers didn't get muted, your speaker didn't get muted. So once again, workspace name, whatever you want, but I'm going to start by doing some baseline code. Hardware tier, whichever one you want, doesn't matter. Maybe just probably just keep that the default all day. But then this is the one that really matters. Make sure you get the Domino Analytics Distribution for this first one, Jupyter Lab, click launch. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and click launch myself because I need this up. And here's where we get to see if we built our training environment to the right specifications, if everybody is able to spin up. Has anyone had Jupyter Labs spin up for them? Spinned up, yay. Sweet. Yeah, Domino's a pretty nice way of working with Docker, and a lot of cool stuff I could show you if we had time, but I've personally learned a lot about Docker by using Domino, because there's some nice ways to do some other stuff with the environments themselves. All right, mine is almost coming up. Cool, so mine is up. Let me give you, if you don't mind looking at my screen real quick, I'll give you a brief tour of what you're seeing here and what you're gonna need to, what buttons you're gonna need to push and such. So after you make some changes to any code or you add any files or anything like that, this save and push all button will be will be activated. Right now it's grayed out. So at any point you can do that. You can save your work back to the project in Domino by saying save and push all. You're not going to need to do that until the end, really. So usually what I do is I'll just say, hey, when I'm done, I click stop. And then when I click stop, if I've made any changes, it'll say, do you want to commit those changes or not? Other than that, everything in kind of along the borders are just Domino specific features. But what you're actually looking at with Jupyter Lab is just plain old Jupyter Lab, just vanilla Jupyter Lab, nothing Domino specific about it. One thing that will be helpful to know is that our project works out of the mount directory, spelled MNT. So that's the directory that that we're going to be working out of. So I misspelled my PDF. So the autopilot, or AutoML pilot, that sounds like a Canadian word, is going to be that's the slides for today. So you can grab those, download those, and rename them with a proper spelling. But so we have a code directory, a data directory, and results directory. Let's jump into the code directory. And here you're going to see several notebooks that you can use, that you can download at any point today. So you can just right click on one of those and you should be able to download it if you want to. You don't need to do that now. You can, it's almost easier to do it back from the project. And I'll show you that in a minute. So what we're going to do to start is, like I said, get some baseline accuracy. So let's open up logistic regression, the logistic regression IPython notebook. So you just double click on it and it pops it open. And then let's just run through this cell by cell. And we're going to look at a data set called the heart disease data set, and we're going to get a baseline on that data set. We might have another data set in here too. All right, so let's run the first cell, imports pandas, NumPy, scikit-learn, and then the train test split from scikit-learn. If you're looking at the heart disease data set, here's a lot of details about it. I'm not going to walk through this all specifically, but basically the target value is 0 or 1. And then we're going to see if we can predict that target value. As we read in this data, which is loaded in the directory, in the mount directory already, so it's a CSV file, we're going to read it in. Here's the list of column names that we're going to pass into pandas. And then we're going to, some of the data sometimes came in as a string. It should all be numeric. So we're going to coerce it to numeric. And then next, I've got some of those columns, even though they're numeric, they still should be treated as categorical. So I created a real quick little function that uses the pandas get dummies function to one column at a time to do one hot encoding. If you're not familiar with one hot encoding, you'll see what it looks like down here when we look at the data set. So let's just define that function by running that cell. By the way, if you're not familiar with Jupyter, the way I'm running cells is once I'm on it, I'm holding on Shift and hitting Return or Enter, depending on if you're on a PC or a Mac. You can also do Control, Enter to run it and stay on it, or you can use this little play button. There are lots of options. Up here under Run, you can do lots of things. Okay, so here I'm going to define my categorical columns. So I know that CP, REST, ECG, so all 5 of these are my categorical columns. And then I'm going to call this create dummies function that I just defined. All right, so now I've got this data set HD standing for heart disease data 1 hot encoding. And I can look at it with the head function. And here's what 1 hot encoding did. We had 3 slopes. We had slope 1, 2, or 3. And the machine learning algorithms are going to think that 2 is twice as good as 1, but really they're just different settings. It's like A, B, and C is what it should be treated as. So 1 hot encoding basically creates new columns and says, all right, if that row had a 2, let's now make it a 1. Instead, everything else is otherwise is a 0. That's what 1 hot encoding does. And so that created a bunch of new columns, and logistic regression needs that. All right, and this next cell, cell number 7 here on my screen, is going to drop any NAs, and then it's going to take the data without the target and make it X underscore HD, and then take the target that we're trying to predict and make it Y underscore HD. And then we're going to pass that into the scikit-learn train test split function. If you're familiar with scikit-learn, you've used this a lot. If not, I'll explain what it does. It basically takes a random sample of your data and calls it the training set, and then the remaining random sample is called the test set. And I forget what the default is. It's something like 70% of the data goes into training and 30% of the data goes into test, something like that. So I'm going to run that, and now this is the data that we're going to use from here on out. So that was just all getting the data ready, processing it. Now we're going to use X HD train, X HD test, Y HD train, and Y HD test. All right, so now we get to use that. So here we're going to import our logistic regression function, and we're going to fit it to the training data. And then we're going to predict it on the test data, and then we're going to compare our prediction to the actual test data. And we'll see how we do. So logistic regression runs really fast. So we got 76% accuracy on the test data. So that's what logistic regression gets us for the heart disease data. I'm not going to run through the breast cancer data. You can run through that if you want. The breast cancer data is actually what I'm going to use if we have time at the end to test, let you kind of try it on your own with the breast cancer data. So you can run through that if you want. Just click all the cells, and we get about 91% accuracy on the test data for breast cancer. All right, that's logistic regression. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There aren't any hyperparameters to train with logistic regression, but logistic regression is a simple algorithm that usually you can get better accuracy with other approaches. So let's try a different approach. Let's open up the random forest IPython notebook. And let's go ahead and just run through this whole thing. So I'm not going to talk through every cell like I did before. A lot of it is very similar. We're loading the data, getting it ready to go, putting it into the train test split. We build a random forest with 10,000 trees. And I've got the random state set the same for all of us. And now we're up from, what were we at, like 76%? Now we're up at 79% accuracy, so we're doing a little bit better with random forest. Now, one thing to note with random forest is that there are a lot of potential hyperparameters that we could set for random forest. So let's do some manual kind of AutoML for a second. I think this will motivate what we're about to see and help you understand what you're about to see with the AutoML tools. So go ahead and open up for the next notebook, open up this manual random forest notebook. And we'll go through this one a little bit slower. So we're going to start again by just loading the typical libraries. We're going to load, let's see, it looks like I'm just using the breast cancer data set. That's fine. So we're going to load the breast cancer data set. And now we're going to look at the random forest classifiers. Up at question mark, random forest classifier. It shows me all the potential hyperparameters that I can set. So I've got number of estimators, which means basically number of trees. I've got criterion. There's Gini or entropy. I've got max depth, how deep do I want my tree to be, how many splits do I want my tree, what are the minimum number of samples in each leaf, on and on and on. There's lots of different things that I could set up here. And how do I know which one's going to be best at predicting in my data? Well, that's where AutoML comes in. AutoML can search through all of these different combinations of settings and help you find the right one. And if you look down in these details that got printed out, you can see here, for example, with the criterion, the default is Gini, but there's also entropy. In estimators can be any integer. So we just a minute ago, we ran 10,000. The default is 100. So there's lots of different, when you have just integers, you could have anything in here. So there's a lot of different possibilities. I'm going to go down to the next cell. So let's, once again, just to get baseline this. So this is the breast cancer data. The baseline on the breast cancer data is 92% accuracy. Now, what I'd like you to do is see if you can do some manual hyperparameter optimization or AutoML. Let's see if we can do a 2x2 here. Let's try to get run random forest with 10 trees and then with 100 trees. And so I've started you off, and I just have a couple places where I want you to do something. So wherever it says to do like this, I want you to change it to what you think it should be. And I'll show you the answer here in a second. But let's go ahead and go through each of these cells where you find it to do, see if you can change it where we're manually trying all 4 of these combinations. 10 trees, 100 trees, criterion equals Gini, or criterion equals entropy. So we've got 10 Gini, 10 entropy, 100 Gini, 100 entropy. So this first one, this first to do should say 100, right? Because this is our 100. We named this at 100 entropy. And then this should be entropy. Okay, so that's how you fix the first cell here. You can run that cell. The next cell is going to fit each of those to our data. So we've got 4 models that we're trying out here. Okay, so we fit it to all the data. Now we're going to get the predictions for all 4 of them. So the models fit. Now we get the predictions for all 4 models. And now I want you to fill in what would go here. So we're trying to get the accuracy. We're using the sklearn function accuracy score. We've got the test data here. So this is the same test data for all of it. So this is the actual, what we're actually trying to predict. If we want to get the accuracy for the 10 trees with Gini, we take this value up here that we just predicted. So this was our 10, this is what we predicted for 10 trees with Gini. So we just replace it like that. Okay, so then go ahead and do that for these other 3 as well. And part of what we're doing here is just to motivate how annoying it is if you're trying to do AutoML on your own. Imagine having, 100. This is only 4 models. Imagine you had 100 models. It's just, you can't go through and just code all this yourself. It's going to take way too long. All right, so if hopefully I'm not going too fast, hopefully you're still with me. We built 4 models and we didn't really improve on the baseline too much. Maybe not at all. I forget what the baseline was. Yeah, we're exactly the same as our baseline still. So what if we built a hyperparameter function? And let's do something a little more crazy. Let's do a 3x2 by 2 by 3. So let's try the number of estimators being 10, 100, and 500, criterion Gini and entropy, max features square root or log 2, and min samples 2, 5, and 10. So now we're kind of going crazy here a little bit. The first thing I need to show you, or we're going to fill in a couple of spots to do here inside of our function to build this AutoML function. The first thing I need to show you is, what does this enumerate call mean? So if I have a list that has A, B, and C, and if I do this syntax here that says, hey, for I and E in enumerate my list, what do I get? What is I and what is E? So just run this. I is the index and E is the actual value in the list. Okay, or whatever you can call this, you could be X and Y, you can call this whatever you want. But I chose I and E right there. All right, give it a second, see if you can look at this function and see if you can figure out what should go in each of these spots. And I have answers for you in a second. If you don't want to, if you're not able to get it, I'll show you the answers in a second. But I think it's a good exercise to try this out. And if you're looks like a few people joined kind of late. Hopefully some of my colleagues will chat directly with you in Zoom to help you get going. All right, I'm going to show you the answers. And if you didn't notice, there's a notebook called Answers, manual random right over here. So you can just take a look at that if you haven't been able to get this yet. So if we look at the Answers notebook, let's get down to where we were. So here, under random forest classifier, we need to pass all of the parameters. So we're going to pass in estimators, criterion, max features, min samples, and then random state's already there. So that's the first to do, is these parameters that we're passing in. The second to do is we're going to fit it with our X-train and Y-train data, right? These are all coming in up here through our function call. And then the third to do is to predict it on the X-test. The fourth and fifth to-dos are to get the accuracy score. And then that's it. So this, if you weren't able to build out that function on your own, take a look at this. And again, this is just to motivate how annoying it is to build your own AutoML. And then if we run this, I'm under the answers IPython notebook, and we pass it these parameters. So we're passing it as a list, 3, 2, 2, and then 3 options. You'll see it print out each of the settings of our 4 parameters. So the first setting of the first parameter, and then we go through all the different iterations here that are possible. And then at the end, we save it into a data frame, sort it by the best, and then we see we got all the way up to 95% accuracy. So you can see how AutoML is really helping you get through this, and helping you, when you can look at all the different hyperparameter settings, you can really start to find some better models that are going to do a good job of predicting on your particular data set. And this is again on test data that it hasn't seen yet. So we found a good setting for this particular data. All right, if you weren't following much of that, that's okay, because this was just motivation for why we need AutoML and what AutoML is doing behind the scenes, and it'll help definitely as we look at these next AutoML tools and packages, but it's not mandatory. So at this point, we are done with this Docker image, and we're done with this first baseline exercise. If you are still catching up, you can keep trying on this Docker image, but again, the point was just to motivate. So let's go ahead. What I'm going to do is go ahead and stop. And then you can choose to commit or to discard. It doesn't really matter because we shouldn't have made, well, you can commit if you want, if you change that function. So go ahead and stop and commit. And this is going to save everything back to all the changes you made back to your local project, and then stop the Docker container. All right, so my session is stopped, and I can close that Chrome tab. All right, so I'll give it a second for everyone to do that. You should be back on your workspaces overview now. And then maybe we can answer some questions too before we jump in to the meat of this. So a couple of technical difficulty questions. And one question says, isn't it a bit easier to use grid search in sklearn? Sure, yeah, I was doing it manually just to motivate how hard it is if you need to do it manually and how nice it is to have packages. Someone says results array wasn't declared in the manual random forest. Oh, I already closed it, so I can't take a look at that. How can I download the code folder? That's a great question. So maybe let me answer that one right now. So if you're back outside of your Docker tab and you're back at the project, if you go to files, now you can see all the code, all the data, everything, and my misspelled PDF. And you can, from here, you can download whatever you want. So you can click in the code, and then these little buttons off to the right, you can download. So you can just play around with this, view it, download it. You can do everything here at the project level. Okay. Any other questions? Don't see a download option for the 3 dots. Oh, get into the code file, get into the code directory, and then go to a specific notebook, perhaps. And then you should be able to. Yeah, you can only download for specific files. You can't download the entire folder at once. All right, you can do that a bit later to keep things moving. Let's go back to workspaces and let's spin up our first AutoML workspace. So we're going to do ML box. So you can call it whatever you want, or you don't need to give it a name. But the key thing that you need to do is pick the environment that says ML box. This has ML box already installed. You can still install it if you pick a different environment. You can still install it on your own inside of the notebook, but it's just annoying and takes a while. So again, Jupyter Lab for everything we're doing today. ML box for the environment, and then that's it. Then launch it. All right, this one's spinning up pretty quick for me. All right, mine's up. I'll wait a couple seconds to give everybody a chance. Once you're in, you're going to open up the ML box notebook. So that's where we're headed here. And then at this point, we're going to start to get down into some of the technical weeds of these packages and really start to dissect them and figure out, with the intent to figure out when you're going to want to use these in your work. Okay, I'm going to assume everybody's ready, or most people are ready. Anybody still spinning up their Docker image? Okay, a couple people are still pulling. I'll wait just a minute. So again, if you were off doing something else, we are using the ML box environment, and then we started that up with Jupyter Lab. How do I navigate from the launcher? So if you're on workspaces, you click new workspace and then pick the ML box environment and then Jupyter Lab and then go. All right, cool. Let's jump into it. So ML box, interesting thing here. It's probably the least, and I don't want to bias you too much to it. It might be the least production ready of the 3 we're going to look at today, but it's also the most flexible. It's super powerful and flexible as far as packages go. So that's why I'm starting with it, because it can really show you what AutoML is capable of. So this is the author's description: fast reading and distributed data processing, cleaning, formatting. It is the best, in my opinion. It's the best at processing, cleaning, and formatting the data of the 3 we're going to look at today. Feature selection and leak detection, it does that. It's pretty naive, but it does it, which not all of them do. And then, of course, it does hyperparameter optimization. And of course, it looks at different models, and then it makes some predictions. That's a no-brainer. Everybody does that. All right, we have some links if you want to learn more. If you use the wrong environment, or if you don't have MLBox pre-installed, these are the steps that I needed to pre-install MLBox on the default environment that I had. For some reason, I had 2 versions of NumPy, so I had to kill them both before MLBox was happy. Anyway, those are commented out because this environment should be ready to go. So MLBox has 3 main sub-packages. There's the pre-processing package, the optimization package, and then the prediction package. And each one of them does what they're named to do. And we'll show you how that works. So I'm going to run this cell to load MLBox and pandas and NumPy and scikit-learn. And then I wrote this all using MLBox version 0.82. I think the latest might be 0.84, but I was getting some errors with that, some incompatibilities with my environment, so I just stuck with 0.82. And there, MLBox creates a job lib directory, and we can delete. It recommends deleting that occasionally. So we're going to delete that, what's in that job lib. If this is your first time running it, you're not going to have anything there. That's fine. So here's a few things to keep in mind with MLBox. This particular thing is super annoying to me because I don't always have CSV files, but it really likes CSV files. If you don't give MLBox a CSV file, you have to basically create your own dictionary where 2 of the elements of the dictionary are pandas data frames, one of them being your test data and one of them being your train data. While that's not too hard if you know Python, it just gives you a chance to make more mistakes along the way. So it's easiest if you just feed MLBox the CSV files, and then it creates that dictionary for you, and life is happy. I found that the documentation to MLBox is not the best, in my opinion. It leaves a lot to be desired. So that's another drawback to MLBox. All right, so we're getting into the heart disease data now. And if you remember, we had 76 and I think 79% accuracy is what we had before with our logistic and random forest. So we'll see if we can get any better here with MLBox. The data is under mount data raw. Okay, so here's another kind of funny note on MLBox. There are several of these funny notes because it's just written a little bit differently. There's a function called train test split inside of MLBox. It behaves differently than scikit-learn's train test split. And when I first was playing with MLBox, it took me forever to wrap my head around it. The best way to think about it is think about using MLBox to do a Kaggle competition. If you've ever done anything on Kaggle, you know that it will give you a data set that has both your inputs and your target in that data set. And then it gives you a second data set that you're going to test your model on. But that data set only has the inputs. And then it's going to give you a third data set, or Kaggle will keep a third data set that only has the answers. So those are the 3 data sets that MLBox thinks about. It thinks about your training data with all of it together, and then it thinks about your test data set with X and Y separated. So it's a little bit different than this train test split from scikit-learn. But again, think about Kaggle, and then you'll start to understand the way MLBox sees the world. One other note on MLBox, it's smart enough to try to infer which fields or inputs are categorical, but it's not smart enough or not flexible enough to let you tell it, hey, this one, even though it's numeric, it's categorical. Because it's not smart enough to do that, you have to somehow put a text string in all of your numeric fields. So it's really annoying. But so what I do is I wrote a little function. If I have a column that's numeric but should be treated as categorical, I put like text underscore then the float, or text underscore, then the int, whatever it is. So again, annoying, but that's a little nuance to MLBox. So these things I'm mentioning right now, this is why I say MLBox might not be the most production ready, because there's, you know, some of those things in a production pipeline are just going to be super big headaches, but it's really powerful at what it does. So let's see what it does. So the next cell we run is to import the heart disease data set. We're going to read in that data. Here's my little function to put text underscore in front of any columns that I say are categorical. Here's my list of categorical columns. So we run through that. And then here's where we got to do some of the CSV gymnastics that MLBox wants. So what I'm doing is I'm creating my train data set. I'm creating my test data set just with pandas commands. And then I'm creating my test data set without the target. And then I write all of those to CSV. So I read in from CSV. I have to get the data the way MLBox wants it, and then spit it out to CSV so that I can read it all in again. So again, that's a bit annoying the way MLBox does that. So here's what MLBox needs on this paths command. So you read in your train CSV and your test CSV that doesn't have the target. And then you tell it what field or what column in your training data was the target. And in this case, for the heart disease, the actual name is target. That's the name of the actual column. So that's what MLBox needs as input. And then it will save all the results out to wherever you tell it to. We're saving it to the results directory here, mount results. So this reader function from MLBox, it takes the paths that we just specified in the cell previous, and it takes the name of the target field, and then it builds this dictionary. So this is the dictionary. MLBox data HD is what I'm going to call this particular dictionary. So you could build that dictionary on your own, but I just find it way easier to use this reader function and pass it to CSVs. All right, so there's nothing, you don't need to change anything on the cells. We're just clicking through them at this point. You can see it went through and it said, hey, I found 5 categorical features. Like, yeah, but I had to put text underscore in front of all the data before you figure that out, but good job, you got it. And numerical features, and here's my training samples and my test samples. All right, also MLBox has a nice feature of looking for IDs, ID fields or columns, and also looking for drift. So we can run this and see if it found any drift. Again, drift is a change in basically data distribution from the training set to the test set, and it didn't find any, so we're good. So it didn't delete any variables, but it would have if it found any. So that's kind of cool. It's a nice feature. All right, and here's where we get to specify the search space, and this is kind of fun. So remember what we did earlier with the random forest and the manual AutoML. We had to go through and type up all this code and maybe even make our own function to do some AutoML. So MLBox does all that for us. You just have to learn a little bit of their syntax, but once you get their syntax down, it's pretty easy to figure this out. So the first one, this is our numeric encoding strategy. So if we have a numeric column that has some missing values in it, what do? We tell MLBox, hey, either make it 0 or give it the mean of that column. Those are the 2 things I want you to try. And then for your categorical encoding strategy, use label encoding, a random projection, or entity embedding. Those are the 3 things I want you to try for categorical data that has missing values. Then we have a feature selection strategy. So we can either use variance or the feature importance score from the random forest function. And then here's the percent of data that we want to drop. 10%, 20%, or 30% of the columns. Which one's going to make the most sense? We're going to try all 3. And then here's all the models that we want to try. We're going to try a light GBM, a random forest, extra trees, and a linear model. So that's the space we're going to search for our actual algorithms. And then when applicable, if not applicable, it will ignore these features, but there's max depth for the trees and subsample as well. So it's going to try 5, 10, and 20, and then it's going to uniformly search between 0.6 and 0.7 for a subsample. So it could be like 0.64. You know, it's going to search in that space. So we just defined in one quick cell our entire strategy for MLBox. So that's pretty fun. And then we are going to actually build that optimizer. So here we go. I capped it at 3 evaluations. Of course, if you're doing AutoML, you're gonna, in real life, you're gonna want this to go a lot longer. But that's all there was to it. So this is our optimizer, our path to the results. The space is what we just defined. Here's that dictionary with all the data, and our max evals is 3. And we can come through and look at it. And it built 1, 2, 3 models. And at the end, it shows you the best hyperparameters for the prediction. In this case, it was an extra trees model with a max depth of 20 and a subsample of 0.6532, blah, blah, blah. Dropping variables by the random forest feature importance with a threshold of dropping 20%, the bottom 20% based on that, and so on and so forth. So that was a combination of all those different hyperparameters that worked out best for this data. So pretty fast, pretty cool for that to work. Yours might look different because it randomly, we're only doing 3 of them, and it randomly goes through them. Also, some of the models take longer to run through. I might have picked 3 quick ones. Yours might still be running, and that's fine. And then you can predict the data, which saves it out to CSV, because again, MLBox is thinking of like a Kaggle competition, so it doesn't show it to you right here, it just saves it to a CSV. And then in order to get the accuracy, we read those predictions back in, and then we can run our accuracy, and I got on mine all the way up to 86% accuracy. If you remember, we were in the 70s previously with logistic regression and random forest. So we jumped quite a bit here on accuracy for this heart disease data. All right, I'm going to pause there. So that's MLBox. Again, some of the good sides to it, you can really specify the search space. You have a lot of control over that search space. It runs things in parallel behind the scenes. So we have 2 cores on these boxes, and it will use both cores in its processing. And it builds that pipeline for you automatically at the end with the best predictors. But it has, and another good thing, it does really nice pre-processing by doing missing value imputations, and it gives you some options for that. But on the downside, it requires the CSVs. It kind of has a funky little logic flow to it that's based off of Kaggle experiments. And I haven't found a way to save the models. Like the actual model that's built, I haven't found a way to save it. I'm sure there is a way, but I haven't easily found that yet. It's not a function call that I can see inside of MLBox. So for those reasons, it's maybe not as production ready, maybe more for a finger in the wind test, more for getting those predictions and just kind of seeing how things work. Yeah, so someone got 84%, 89, yeah. Matthias, you win. You got the best. Again, those are just going to be random based on the 3 that they chose for us. How it finds the best parameters? So I told it again to only do 3 iterations, which is kind of silly. For AutoML, you do many more than 3, but I said just do 3, and it randomly picked 3, and it found the best one. Yeah. So someone commented this could be good for competitions, but tough when you have lots of data. Yeah, you're right. With MLBox and the requirement to go back and forth between CSVs, yeah, it's not going to work the best for big data. So the next 2, so hang on. The next 2 we'll talk about something that's a little more production ready. How is the process for doing AutoML for neural networks different? It's quite a bit different because for one reason, every iteration is super expensive with neural networks. Typically, you have tons of data. Secondly, you want to find, so the way that AutoKeras works, and the short answer is go Google AutoKeras and read up on that. But just as a summary, it will search through basically like an architecture framework. It will try to keep the same architecture and then search for variants of that architecture as it goes. So it doesn't randomly destroy your tree and create a whole entirely different tree. It tries to keep it within the same architecture that either you set or that it starts to find through its search. Yeah, pickle is the way that, or joblib files are the way that you can export from sklearn. So the next two we'll see have an easy way to do that. What's the difference between this MLBox hyperparameter training and the pipeline with grid search? Yeah, not much, except MLBox uses Bayesian optimization to go through it, so it's not pure grid search. We set up those parameters, but in that parameter space, there is some flexibility. This parameter space, to be honest, is pretty grid search-like. It's pretty deterministic. But for example, this uniform right here, it says, hey, search anything in this range. So as we're going through ranges like that, or even in the whole hyperparameter space, how do we determine where we go? It uses, I believe it's called tree of Parson. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but it's a Bayesian optimization approach that goes through and tries to find the optimal settings in here, and then hones in on those optimal settings. So it's not just going to randomly try everything. It tries to do it in a smart way that's going to figure it out quickly. So it's definitely faster than grid search. All right, cool. Let's move on to the other two, which are also super interesting. So let's go ahead and stop. You're going to stop these Docker containers. You can't just leave them all running because, again, we have a limit of 2 per person. So let's stop the MLBox Docker container. You can commit everything. Great questions, by the way, and thank you for asking them too. It's makes this a lot better for me if I know kind of where you're at and what questions you have and what's on your mind. Okay, the next one I already have up, but let me show you what you need to do. So we're going to use the default environment, which is the scikit-learn based AutoML environment. So use the scikit-learn environment. You can call it whatever you want, you know, SKL, AML, whatever. It doesn't, it's your name. You name it whatever you want, Jupyter Lab, and then kick that off. So this one environment will work with both auto sklearn and with Teapot. All three of these are based on scikit-learn, but MLBox is so different in its dependencies that you usually don't want to install MLBox and auto sklearn in the same environment. The dependencies start to mesh up and get crazy. So that's where Docker really comes in handy, because you can have a little container, its own little private environment, and they're not gonna mess with each other. Okay, so again, sklearn based AutoML, scikit-learn based AutoML, Jupyter Lab, spin it up. Mine's already there, so I'm gonna go into it. All right, so I'll just talk a little bit while I'm waiting for it to spin up for everybody. As I mentioned, these two are much more production ready. Let's start with, once you get it open, your code, go to your code folder. Let's start with auto sklearn. So I won't run too many cells until I give it a little bit for everyone to spin up. I'll just start talking through it. So here's the author's description. It's an automated machine learning toolkit based on scikit-learn. A bunch of links for you if you want to go study some more. So here's some things that the auto sklearn is really good at. It's super good at building ensembles, and it also it specializes at parallelization. So if you had a cluster of machines, so this is to that big data question. If you had a cluster of machines and you had gigabytes and gigabytes of data that you need to run AutoML on, if you think about each of these runs, each of these iterations of any of these AutoML packages, they can all be run completely independently, right? They're just taking snapshots of the data or reading from the same memory space, but then going off and doing their own calculations on their own algorithm, and their algorithm and hyperparameter settings are different and disjoint from each other. So auto sklearn allows you to very easily turn on parallelization on a particular box. So I usually call that vertical parallelization, and some people use vertical and horizontal in different ways, but that's how I think of it. On the same box, I can use all the cores, and I can do horizontal parallelization too. And auto sklearn has some nice functions to stitch those together at the end to build one big ensemble based off of what you ran on 100 different boxes. So you've got 100 tiers, 100 Docker containers spun up, each of them using all the cores and each of them building models. At the end, I have some real nice functions to stitch all that together. So that's the power, the big selling point for me of auto sklearn is that ability to control all that parallelization. All right, hoping you guys have all had this spun up. If you are on your own environment elsewhere, you might need to install, and but I've already got it pre-installed in this environment, so I'm just going to run the import command. And I wrote everything for 5.2, but on this particular environment and for this Docker image on this training environment that we have for you here today, 6 ran better for me. I got some package dependency errors with 5.2, so 6 was the best one for me. Auto sklearn gives lots of warnings, so since this is kind of a demo, just going to turn off the warnings. And let's take a look at the classification function so I can show you how this works under the hood. Okay, so take a look at these parameters. If yours isn't spun up, you can just look at my screen. So you can control how long it runs, which with MLBox, you could only control the number of iterations. So this time control is nice, especially for a workshop like this. You can control how long each run individually takes. That's nice. You can control the size of your final ensemble. You can take the best from the ensemble. You have your ensemble. You can have ensemble memory limit. So all these things are kind of pointing to large-scale AutoML, right? They've got some nice things up their sleeve to help you with that. Again, another memory control parameter. Estimators, you can have pre-processors. I haven't played around with those. It'd be nice because out of the box, it doesn't really handle like missing values very well. So it'd be nice to include some of these pre-processors and check that out. You can do either holdout or cross-validation, which again is going to increase the number of iterations if you're familiar with cross-validation, but that's a nice strategy you have there. You have some temp folders. You can delete those temp folders in jobs. So this is how you would turn on parallelization. So we have 2 cores on these boxes. So I believe I set in jobs to 2 down below, and then it'll theoretically run a little bit quicker. Be nicer if you had like 4 cores, right? Something bigger, then you could really see it. The SMAC, that has to do with how it does hyperparameter tuning. I've got a link to it back in the README of the project overview, so you can learn more there. Does it support imbalanced data? You know, I haven't looked into that specifically, so I don't know if it does. I have seen weights in here at some point where you can weight the data, but I don't remember seeing anything that out of the box supported imbalanced data. That's a good question though. I'll see if I can look into that if we take a break here in a minute. Once we're done with this part and you guys kind of go on your own, hopefully I remember to jump back to that one. Okay, I'm not going to read through all the details of each of those inputs. I think most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but you can read through all those details. All right, let's load the heart disease data. So as usual, we're just loading it as we've always done in the past. We're doing one hot encoding in this instance. Auto sklearn can do one-hot encoding for you if you tell it which categorical variables there are, which is nice. So you can say, you don't have to put the text underscore in front. You can say, hey, these columns are categorical. Go do the right thing, and it'll go do the right thing. So that's nice. All right. This cell does the scikit learn train test split, just like before. And now we're ready to go. Oh, one other thing. You'll get some errors or some errors if you don't clean up the output directories. So this is just a simple function that I wrote that says, hey, give me the directories and a flag if you want to delete or not. And let's go clean up those just with an rm Linux command. So pretty simple. All right, here are our directories. We're going to run that cleanup function that I just defined, and then we're going to define our AutoML classifier. So I'm going to give it 60 seconds total, since this is just a workshop. Each run is going to have a 30-second limit. My temp folder comes from here. My output folder comes from here. And I'm going to, I wanted to see all the evaluator output. There's going to be a lot of logs down below, but that's okay. We want to see it. We're going to use holdout instead of cross-validation. Again, it's a little bit quicker. And we're going to, you can specify what percentage you want for the training. I believe this is the default, so I didn't need to specify that one. And then here's n jobs. Let's do this with 2 jobs. Use both cores. All right, so that's all defined. And now to run it, you just call the fit function. So it's pretty nice. You give it the data. You can give it a name for logging if you want. So let's run that. Yeah, what is the search space? Great question. That's what this that SMAC thing is. It's a way to automatically define the search space behind the scenes. So unfortunately, it's a little bit of a black box what it's doing right now. So I'm running this cell. It's gonna run for a whole minute. See how many models it can run through. It's going to be similar to what you saw with MLBox. It's going to check XGBoost, light extra trees, light GBM, linear, random forest. It checks all those, all the default ones for the classifier, but you don't have control over that search space. From what I've read, you can dig in and actually control it and define it a little bit more, but it's not easy. It's a lot of work to get in there and define that search space. So I just kind of let it run, let it do its thing, and then see how good of results I can get out of it. Okay, so it finished, and it doesn't give me any output here other than saying that it's done. So I can save the predictions by with the predict function, and then it's saved here in memory. And then here, excuse me, is just a note on AutoScaler. I ran into this when I was first studying about it. There's a function, a method called fit ensemble. And I thought, oh yeah, I like ensembles. Let me fit an ensemble. I want to do that. And it kept giving me errors and weird messages, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. It turns out when you run fit, which we did up in this previous cell, it creates an ensemble for you. So it's already doing ensembling up there. What fit ensemble is meant to do is in that situation where I was describing, if you have horizontal parallelization and you have a bunch of different AutoMLs running all over the place, and then you want to bring those together into one big ensemble, that's what fit ensemble is for. So just a note in case you run into that. And if you want to save models, all you have to do is use your typical pickle or joblib procedures. So again, very familiar ground for most of us. There's an accuracy score, and then we can also do some print statistics. So let's run those. So we got through, we tried 94 algorithms in that minute. So it did a lot for me. Yours might be a little different. 23 of them crashed, probably most of those because of the time limit. It was still running when it crashed. 71 algorithms were successful, or maybe they crashed for some other reason. I don't really know. And then our accuracy wasn't that great, but hey, this is just a toy data set, right? We're not, great accuracy doesn't really mean this was a better approach. And anyway, so that's how it works. You can see those. And then the model details are pretty nice. So each of these little blocks of output show you what that particular model, how it was built, and then all of these together, this is your ensemble. So we have an ensemble here based off of, let's see, this was a multinomial naive Bayes. That was the particular algorithm it searched here. And then here you have all the different parameters. So it used the Gini for classification, and had a bunch. I won't go through all the hyperparameters, but they're all there. This next one was a pre-processed with principal components analysis. And where is my classifier? Stochastic gradient descent. So a simple one. And this one down here. Anyway, so you can go through and you can see that this one was AdaBoost. So it has lots of different flavors that it's going through of modeling choices that it's trying. Extra trees. And all those, again, are in one big ensemble, as you can see, quite long. And then at the end, this is just some simple syntax to save the actual model file to disk. So now I've saved that over to results. AutoScaler and HD joblib. Oh, not under code results. Let's go back up here. This results folder. So here we go. Saved seconds ago, if you see on my screen. So this joblib file was just saved. I just ran that cell. So that's basically like a pickle that you can then go use and put it into production. So much more ready for production, right? All right, let's get back to the code directory and open up Teapot and check that one out. Any questions on AutoScaler? Any other questions? Can we define the search criteria? Yeah, again, that's in that SMAC thing. It's not easy to do. It's probably going to take you several hours of research to figure out how to define the dictionary and then feed the dictionary into it. I spent a couple hours on it and then just said, for the sake of the workshop, I'm not going to dive that deep into it because it was not easy. This package is meant to just be run like a black box. But then it gives you good output as to what it built. So yes, you can, but it's not easy. All right, cool. Let's check out Teapot. Teapot is super cool. The coolest thing about Teapot is that it gives you Python code for what you just did at the end, which is, everybody loves that a lot. It's really nice. Actually, you can see on my screen, I've already run this earlier, so you can see, you might have these too. I forget. It depends on when you copied this. You might have some Teapot pipelines, some Python files in yours. And if you just open them up, sometimes they're simple. Like this one just did a simple pipeline with logistic regression. Sometimes they're a little bit more complicated with a few more steps in them. Anyway, we'll build some here ourselves. So Teapot does that. The other interesting thing about Teapot is it, instead of using Bayesian optimization, which both MLBox and AutoScaler used Bayesian optimization, Teapot uses a genetic search algorithm. So when you're using Bayesian optimization, you kind of jump around your search space, trying to find the right spot. And usually it's not like you're really fast iterating to a solution. With genetic search, you'll see the accuracy of each iteration get a little bit better and a little bit better. So the way genetic search works is it finds an area and then it permutates or generates offspring around that area. And then once it finds one of those that works, it mutates towards that area of the search space, and then again produces offspring. And so it's kind of like a biological flow through your search space, trying to find the optimum combination of models and hyperparameters. So let's dive into that and check it out. Again, it gives you some more control over over what you're looking at over your search space, but not as much as MLBox. That's why I started with MLBox. It really lets you see under the covers as to what's going on, which I thought was a good one to start with. So I'm in the same Docker container. I just opened up a new tab in here for Teapot. Okay, hopefully everybody's with me. And if you just want to watch, that's fine too. So loading the heart disease data, just like before. And all right, a couple of things here with Teapot. Let's see this question. Any other famous optimization techniques available? Yeah, there are a few others. Again, hopefully I remember to get to that question too. Also back in the slides, that one slide that had everything on it, that'll show you a bunch of the different optimization routines that are possible, ones that are out there. Okay, so here's the Teapot classifier function. You've got the number of generations, which is basically kind of like your offspring. So how many offspring do you want to, generations and population size together give you offspring. Offspring size, usually you don't use those, you just go with generations and population size. Mutation rate, crossover rate. So these are all these first ones are all the parameters for this genetic search. It's kind of fun to play around with and work with. I'm just going to use accuracy as my optimization metric of choice. It does cross-validation, so it takes a little bit longer to run through each iteration. It does that by default. In jobs, we can change that to 2 since we have 2 cores, and we can give it a max time limit. I think I give it 2-minute time limit because it takes longer with genetic search, and also since it's doing cross-validation, it takes a little bit longer, but you'll see it's kind of fun to see the accuracy get a little bit better and better. So the other thing to note, there is you have to pick a, what do we call it? A dictionary, I guess. Yeah, a config dictionary. You have to pick a config dictionary for each run of Teapot. So you can make your own. So you can write your own custom dictionary, and that will define your search space. Just like we did with MLBox, we had a dictionary. You have to figure out the Teapot syntax, and I've got an example of that down below. And then it'll search through that space for you. Or you can use one of the pre-configured ones. There's Teapot Lite, which builds models fast. There's one for genomic studies called Teapot MDR. There's one for sparse models and sparse data sets. And then the default is just a Teapot classifier. So on this first cell here that I'm running, that I just hit now, and it's going to run for 2 minutes. That's the time limit I gave it. I'm using the Teapot classifier, just the generic, out of the box run. At each iteration, I'm using only 5 generations, again, keeping it kind of small. I put in jobs equal to 4. I think that's left over from when I had a bigger tier, but it's fine. It'll use all 2 of our cores. And when we're done, it's going to export a pipeline called teapot hd pipeline.py. So it'll tell you in Python code everything that we just did, which is super cool. This takes a little bit, this Teapot classifier, again, is a little bit slow because it has a cross-validation going on, and the genetic algorithm itself is also a little bit slow because it has so many offspring. So at each iteration is trying all 5 generations, cross-validation, all going on at the same time. It is using both cores, but it still takes a while. So our first generation is done. Our internal cross-validated score was 0.85, and then the second generation got a little bit better. So it's finding the optimal spot in the space a little bit. We're up to 0.86, and we'll probably only get 1 or 2 more generations out of this, and it probably won't get much better than 0.86. We'll let that run. And then we will, this is the cross-validated score. And then we can test it on our holdout sample when that's done and see what we get. Last time I ran it, I got 0.76. All right, should be wrapping up here in just a couple seconds. We can run that. And then the next one we're going to run is the Lite. For config dictionary, we'll use Teapot Lite. And that one runs much quicker, and look, we should get a lot more generations out of it. So I'll go ahead and kick that one off. All right, so we've got 5 generations. The best cross-validated score we got was 0.868. And then on the holdout sample, we got 0.72. And now it's running our light configuration, which will get through a lot more generations because these are lighter algorithms that run quicker. And since our data is pretty simple, it works good. You'll notice here I put in jobs equal to -1. That's if you just want to always have parallelization on, that's the best setting to set it at. That means it'll use all the cores available to it. I'm only doing 2 generations here. And I set the time to 1 minute on this one instead of 2. So it'll finish a little bit quicker. And you can see it goes faster through it. We're already getting better cross-validated scores. Started better. It's getting better as it goes. And then we'll see what we get at the end. And then while that's running, here's an example, some code that you can borrow for how to set your own search space. So when you define it like this, you're defining your own search space, so you can't use one of those pre-built config dictionaries, but you have some ability to fine-tune it yourself. And I got almost 0.79, so much better accuracy with this light model. All right, and then we can take a look at this pipeline just got built, so we can take a look at it and see what was inside of our Python code. So again, pretty simple, not much going on. This data is simple. It really liked logistic regression, so that's what it found. But hey, it found the right architecture for us, right? Because the data is simple, and it got us some good accuracy. All right, that is the run through of Teapot. Let's see. Let's go ahead and stop this. And then once you can, if yours is still running, that's fine. Let it run, or you can stop at any time. I'm going to jump back over to the overview, to our README, and go through this summary. And then I have a little exercise for you to see that we can work on together. And myself and my colleagues can help you through this exercise. We're going to try, we just did everything on the heart disease data. We're going to try it on the breast cancer data on your own. So first of all, the summary. Teapot. So it's based on scikit-learn. There, as you just saw, there's some preset list of space dictionaries to choose from. And it's a little bit involved to customize your own search space, but not too bad. Very easy to parallelize jobs. It uses genetic algorithms for its optimization, and you can click on that to learn more. It has some data pre-processing involved in there. And one nice thing that you'll see when you have bigger data that's more realistic is it will stack ensembles for you. So it will build ensembles and it will build stacked ensembles. Stacked means it will take a couple of the first ensembles, use the predictions of that in a new model together to get your final prediction. And that's been proven to get some better accuracy, especially on more complicated data sets. So Teapot's very production ready. One of my favorites. Definitely encourage you looking at that in production. AutoSK-Learn, also a good one based on scikit-learn. It fits ensembles, easy to parallelize. It uses this SMAC thing, which is a framework that has Bayesian optimization inside of it. So it's a little bit harder to define the search space on your own, but it can be done, but it's harder. Yeah, it doesn't give you fine-grained control. And the first one we looked at was MLBox. The easiest way to define the search space, very transparent. The library it uses is a hyperopt library, which is uses a form of Bayesian optimization. It does that encoding of missing variables very transparently, has drift detection, which is nice. It doesn't have time limits, and parallelization is kind of turned on under the hood, but you can't control it on your own. And I haven't been able to find a way to easily export models out of it. Teapot gives you the code. AutoSK-Learn, you can easily use Pickle or JobLib. MLBox, not so much. The documentation isn't as mature. And then you can read on AutoSK-Learn, Google, and Azure if you want. And then you can look at these others if you want as well. But that's a summary of the 3 that we just looked at. So I'm going to stop this workspace and commit it. the last thing that I would have you do is let's start a new workspace. And actually, we probably could have kept that one open. It's all right. We'll start a clean one. Let's keep the scikit-learn based AutoML, and I'll call this one test. Jupyter Lab as always, and let's spin that up. So we'll spin up a scikit-learn based environment, Jupyter Lab. And what we're going to do here is the breast cancer data set is one I want you to see if you can modify the code for TPOT and for AutoSKLearn on the breast cancer data, and see, and we can even see in the chat window who can get the best accuracy on it. And now would also be a great time for questions if you have any more. All right, so what I would encourage you to do once that comes up is to take, let's just start with, I don't know, let's start with AutoSKLearn. And and then you can, well, let's see, what should we do? Should we duplicate it? Well, there's two things you do. You can either duplicate this and then play with it on your own, or if you want, I'll just kind of let you know, under Scratch, I've got some of these notebooks that have -BC at the end and have some of the breast cancer data there for you. So maybe for the sake of time, since we only have 15 minutes left, it's going to take you too long to do this from scratch to figure out all the pandas calls and everything. Maybe just go under the Scratch folder, under code, and open up, for example, AutoSKLearn with breast cancer. And I've got all the syntax there for you to load up the breast cancer data. And then you can try different things. With AutoSKLearn, there's not too much control you have except for increasing the time limit. And maybe changing this from holdout to cross-validation in order to see what type of model you can get. So you can play around with that. And then with TPOT, you're going to have a little bit more control in the dictionary you choose. You can try the light one. You can open up the other notebooks that we had for reference to see more of the notes. You can try light. You can try the default. You can make your own. And then the other thing you can do is spin up another Docker image and try MLBox. Remember, MLBox needs to be separate from these two, a separate Docker container, because the dependencies don't match. So what I had planned for the last few minutes here was for you to try that on your own and see if you can, you're going to usually get better accuracy with the breast cancer data. There's no categorical variables in the breast cancer data. It's all numeric, and they're all meant to be numeric. They're already set up in the right way. So nothing categorical, so you just kind of go for it. It's much easier to just read it in and go, and then see how we do with getting accuracy. So while you're doing that, I can answer some questions in the chat too, in the last few minutes we have. All right, so one question from the chat: do you recommend using AutoML in a solution, or is it better to use these as a starting point? It's better to use them as a starting point. I haven't heard of anybody using AutoML in production without doing some type of cleaning to the model or customization of it. So, but I have heard lots of people use it as kind of one of the first steps they do to see how much accuracy they can expect to get from this particular data set, or if their feature engineering that they're doing on their own is getting to a state of the data that's going to be more accurate in the end. So it's a good kind of litmus test, but usually people don't just put it into production straight away. I believe there are some Spark-based AutoMLs that let me see if I can remember what that's called. Yeah, it looks like it looks like there might be an Apache Spark MLlib, which is going to, of course, take advantage of that horizontal parallelization. I would not be surprised if it's using something like AutoSKLearn and then just automating that fit ensemble command that I was talking about, where it works on different boxes in a cluster. If it's not using that exact code, it's doing something very similar. It's going to be straightforward. It's going to be what we just did today, except doing it a bunch of times at once. For Teapot, can we put feature imputation and feature selection in the search space like MLBox? Great question. I know it has a slot for pre-processing. It looks like you can, yes. The details of how to do it, you need to look it up a little bit and see, but yeah, it can be done. That can be part of the pipeline. And if anybody is trying the breast cancer data on your own with the code under the Scratch folder as a starting point, go ahead and post in the chat what type of accuracy you're getting on your test, on your holdout data, and we can kind of see how everyone's doing. I'll run mine here so we have a baseline. And maybe put which package you used as well. MLlib might be an interesting one if you spin up another Docker container for MLlib. That one's, you're right, that one has the most control over the search space. So that would be an interesting one to try. See if you can define a good search space that's going to get good accuracy on the breast cancer data. I'll do that myself here. Just be sure when you're doing I called it MLlib, MLBox. When you're doing MLBox, be sure to use the MLBox environment. All right, yeah, I got 9652 as well with Teapot Lite. I wonder if so things you can try is like bump up the number of generations, like maybe try 10. I'm gonna try 10 instead of 2. Instead of 1 minute, let's give it 3 minutes and see what that can do. And then for MLBox, there's an MLBox-BC notebook out there. And here you can play around with the space. You can try different things. Perhaps we might want to get rid of more variables. So maybe I do 25 up to 40% of my variables gone with the feature selection. And max depth, perhaps you want to go a little bit deeper. So you could try 40, I don't know, 25, or maybe 10. And the subsample, maybe we widen that a bit. So you can just play around with different things, see how it feels when you play around with things on there. And let's see, where do I call it? So processing the data. Here's where I call it. So I'm going to up it from 3 to, let's say, 10. Let's see how that does. Might take a little bit longer, but that's all right. That's going through pretty quick. Maybe I should go more than 10. So over on, with just a couple quick changes on ML box, I got the same as Nas did. So ML box. So if you're watching my screen, that's just kind of how you would play around with it. Again, just go to that search space. I'm going to up this from 10 to, let's go to 20 because that went pretty fast. So you can change the max number of evals, change the space, how that space is defined, and try a few things. And every now and then you hit a modeling approach that takes a long time. Like I must have hit one here that takes a little bit while because now it's kind of stuck on this one. So sometimes it takes a while. And also sometimes I found if you restart the kernel and then kick it off again, it runs faster. So sometimes the Jupyter kernel gets bogged down. Maybe the memory gets all eaten up. You might need to clear the memory and start it over again. So it feels like it's just going way too slow. Then do that. Oh, someone got 98 with Teapot. Nice. I wonder, Thomas, if you could look at the output, if it spit out the Python and tell us what modeling approach it used inside of that Teapot pipeline. So it should have spit out a Python, a .py file. You can double click that .py file inside of Jupyter and it'll open it up, and you can kind of dissect, look at what it did. Yeah, Domino does support Scala and Spark, yes. Obviously we don't have it here in the training environment, but Domino has it pre-configures Spark and takes care of all of the DevOps behind that. You just tell it how many nodes you want in the cluster, and it spins it up. Oh, training set, Thomas. Yeah. False alarm. All right, mine's taking forever. I'm going to restart my kernel. Restart kernel and run all cells. So under kernel, this is a trick inside of Jupyter. If Jupyter, sometimes it gets bogged down with memory. You can just do restart kernel and run all cells. Let's see if it goes quicker for me now. All right, yep, going faster so far. All right, well, we got 5 minutes left for you to play around with this. Of course, you can keep playing around with it for a little bit, but we do have another training, like I mentioned, on the same environment coming up at 11 Pacific time, and that's an intro to ML with Python. And my colleague Josh Mineroff is giving that training as also through the same MLOps conference. So you can go look at that that workshop and register for it, and you should be able to join that with Josh here in an hour from now. If it's full, let us know, and we might be able to, maybe we can send you the Zoom link directly. I think not everyone that registers is going to show up. So has anyone tried to register for that and it's full? If so, let me know on the chat and we can help you out. Oh, and looks like we're going to shut down any workspaces you have open. We'll shut down in about 20 minutes to get ready for the next workshop. So we're going to manually kill all your processes before the next workshop starts. So be sure to, you have about 20 minutes to save everything. So again, if you go back to the project homepage and then click on files, that's how you get in there and you can download those notebooks, okay? Hopefully this has been beneficial for you. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about AutoML, about kind of what makes it tick, why we use it, what are the differences between some of the major packages. And yeah, we tried to make this really practical and hands-on. Hopefully it came across that way. And reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like. Happy to connect. And it's a small world out there, so I'm sure we will, our paths will cross again. Looks like people are saying the other one's full. If you want to maybe send me or Josh Mineroff, maybe just keep it simple, send me a private message with your email address. I'll take a look at the registrations and see if we can get you in. Okay, because we had almost 200 people register for this one, and about 80 showed up. So if you want to get on that other workshop, I think we might have room, because I don't think everyone that registers is going to show up. So send me a private message with your email in the chat, and I'll send you the Zoom. I think all you need is a Zoom link, then you're in. Okay, I'll hang on here a little bit just to grab all those emails, the people that want to join the other one. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Have a great day, everybody. And if you're still on, I see all those emails coming through. Don't worry, we'll grab them and we'll get you hooked up.